Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. Super excited for today's episode. Today, I am joined by Grant Clark. Not the first time that Grant has been on the podcast, but I just want to tell you a little bit about him in case you've forgotten. Grant is the founder of something known as the Hidden Warrior, and he has transformed his own health challenges into a mission to help others heal through movement. We talk about healing through movement, guys. This is what we talk about: somatic therapies. With his background in fitness and yoga, Grant empowers individuals to build resilience through body-focused practices. In today's episode, we're going to explore the powerful connection between trauma and physical tension, especially focusing on releasing trauma from the hips and how that can impact your overall well-being. Welcome back. Let's go. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today is my amazing guest, Grant Clark. And this is not the first time that Grant has been on the podcast. Grant is the founder of Hidden Warrior, as I've mentioned. And today, what we're going to really talk about is how trauma gets stored inside the body. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So before we even get started, just to give a primer for people who haven't listened to our first episode, which we'll have the link to in the show notes, I know you had your own health challenges throughout your life, and they played a really big role in opening up Hidden Warrior. Can you share with people a little bit about what those challenges were?
Sure. So basically, when I was a teenager, I played a lot of tennis and no one taught me how to rotate. So I hurt my back, not a slip disc or anything, but hurt my back bad enough that lower back spot that occasionally gets tight, when you do too much gardening or you pull on something weird, that stayed tight on me for about 2 or 3 years, and didn't loosen up. So, I eventually ran into a functional trainer who helped me get rid of that pain. But a functional trainer, somebody who specialized in movement and just moving well through the day, helped me through that. And then as I was working through that and kind of getting through more or less being old way before my time, because at 19, you're supposed to feel invincible. And I hear people say this to me all the time where they're like, you're a teenager, nothing can hurt you. And I go, yeah, I've never really had that. And then a couple of years down the line, had a lot of antibiotics as a kid and some other stuff, but ended up finding out that I had Epstein-Barr from a suppressed immune system that was probably, and we worked on this directly, which is how Stacey and I met, which was probably directly related to how I was dealing with stress and stuff that happened from my childhood. Had a pretty idyllic childhood, but school was kind of hard. And how I was handling that stress. But regardless, that was around 27. So it took a couple years, took about 2 or 3 years to start getting better. And then after I worked with you and we started working on the mental side of it, that's where things really started to flip. And the signs for me in Epstein-Barr can show up in a lot of ways for a lot of people. But for me, it was, I'm about 6'1", and I think at my sickest, I was like 133. Yeah. I was 133 pounds, which is a little thin. And after getting a handle on the mental side of it and being able to digest food better, because for me, it showed up as always like stomach problems or inability to digest food, always being hungry, but never being able to gain weight. That helped me bounce back to where I'm floating around the 170s now.
Amazing.
So it's like, a whole extra person. And then actually to add to that, since the last time we talked, we were just talking about this before we started recording, I then found out that I had been exposed to a pretty egregious amount of black mold for probably a number of years. And I did fine in terms of, no big aches, no big issues. It's good to get rid of the extra bit. But what's interesting now is after being rid of that environment and figuring it out, the people have always considered me pretty high energy, especially in my 30s. Now it's like doubled. So now it's like I can go as long as I want forever.
That's amazing. Well, I do remember when you first came to me, and that's not what we're going to talk about today,
Yeah.
but you had found yourself to be in a very, very restrictive diet because the
Mhm.
way that all of these ailments were showing up for you was causing a lot of fear in and around food.
Yeah.
And this idea of, if I eat X, I'm going to really be suffering from it.
Yeah.
And you weren't sure if that was even really going to be the case anymore, but you were still working from that lens. And
Yeah.
so you knew you had a baby coming into the mix. You're like,
Mhm.
I got to find a way to be more flexible in my life around other people. It was causing a lot of different anxieties. And I think the work that we did was really transformative. I loved
Yeah.
working with you.
Oh no, it was good. Now it's become, what's interesting is now it's become how to move from a space of like, I have healed, I am healing, I am this, to, okay, what do I want to do
Yeah.
with the body that I have? And then also still dealing with those little bit of reverberations, because it's patterns, and the new ones are stronger every year, but you spent a couple decades in one way. It takes a little time to get the other thing working. But it's been enough where now it's kind of understanding, and we can get into this when we start talking about hips and stress and pain. But what I often tell people is, you try to go anti-inflammatory, you try to go, vegetable only, you try to stay away from nightshades, or there's a lot of diets out there, right? There's a lot of health food diets, and it can be an extremely personal journey for figuring out how you get there. But in my mind, it's like, if you are relaxed and you are moving for a reasonable amount of time a day, like you're getting some movement in, you're doing some stretching, you're not tight, and you're sleeping enough, you can eat whatever you want and your body will adapt. Now, certain foods will give you more energy, certainly. Like if I go eat a hamburger with bacon on it and cheese, I am going to want to take a nap because I am a human. But but will that knock me out? Will that make me lose weight, as what used to happen to me if I ate something that didn't digest well? My body would catabolize itself. Not really, not anymore. But still being in that state of mind, which again is circling back to our original
Right.
topic today. But like circling back to that mind set of, there's still that piece of me that's sometimes like, is this okay? Is this all right? And then
Well, I
it's
would say it's a part of you. It's a very protective part that's like, "Bup, bup,
Mhm.
bup, bup. Wait a minute, remember how it used to be? Are you sure you want to do that?" It's that
Mhm.
questioning piece.
And now it's mostly recognizing the question piece and being like, thanks, I appreciate the heads up. It's not super necessary right
Yeah, I
now.
love it. I
Like,
love it.
we're an
So,
adult. It's fine.
I wanted to have you on because you're local to me, first of all. So anybody that's listening here that's local, his place is amazing. It's right over in Peapack, right? Is that considered Peapack?
It's in Pluckaman.
Pluckaman. I knew it
Pluckaman,
started with a
Bedminster.
P.
Yeah,
Pluckaman,
it's
right
fine.
next to
It's on the same route.
Bedminster. It's right on that main strip. Adorable spot. Um, I know that you work with people who are in physical pain. Tell me who your
Yes.
ideal client is so we can back into this.
Oh,
Okay. So
sure.
who typically comes to you?
Typically people who come to me are usually, we hit all ages, but the majority of my clients are in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. They're often dealing with some sort of long-term issue, not something, or maybe they've come out of physical therapy, but they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I keep my stability, mobility, or what I've been calling recently, like, how do I keep my durability? Like, how can I
Yeah.
keep doing the things that I want to do, or get back to the things that I want to do, being outside of pain and everything else. So the type of pain that we're talking about can be anything from, name a joint, knees, hips, back, shoulders that feel sticky or have had direct injury or replacement at some point, or dealing with an inflammatory issue like arthritis or Lyme disease or Epstein-Barr, or more recently, a fair amount of long COVID people,
Yes.
who I really feel for, because that's it's a rough situation. So in all of those cases, it's about figuring out, on my end, this is why I always do complimentary assessments if people are interested, is I always like to have people come in and we can get a sense if I can actually help. And if we can do movement and see a direct correction within about 20 or 30 minutes, I can help. In some cases, people are so inflamed it's why it takes a village, and I'm happy I know you, because sometimes I run into people where I'm like, there is an immense amount of mental stress here. We can address that through some of the meditative practices, through qigong, which is kind of like Chinese yoga or related to Tai Chi. But we might want to get to the core a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
And
I guess
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying it's like a short answer is my ideal client is somebody who is not comfortable and is really motivated to get out of that space.
So this is a really good segue, because some people don't realize that part of the pain that they're having, it's not everyone, that part of the pain that they're having could be that they're holding trauma in their body. I see it a lot in hips, neck, shoulders, migraines, right? But today I really wanted to focus on the hips. Like, what are some physical signs to watch out for if someone is having, say, hip issues, and you think maybe there could be some unresolved emotional distress?
Emotional issues.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, and what I always like to talk about with people, is it's a two-way street. So think of, since we're speaking locally, think of Highway 287, right? Like there are two corresponding roads between the brain and the body, and the brain helps really define what the body feels, and the body also helps define what the brain feels. And arguably, if we were looking at those two roads, probably the brain to the body one is a little more like the commuter road. Like there's more cars going that way. It matters more. But at the same time, it's like from the body to the brain, that feedback is also helpful. So something that I find that often shows up with people when they're having pain, or when they're not sure what's going on with their body, is I'm just going to throw out a few facts about the hips in general, just to lay a baseline. Or shoulders or the neck is, all right, so the most mobile joint in your body is the shoulder. The second most mobile joint in your body are your hips. What I mean by that is that in terms of physical movement, those are the most capable of range of motion than anything else in the human body. And so that means that there's a lot of connective tissue and a lot of different bones and movements that make all that movement work together. Both of those joints are the only things capable of something called circumduction in your body, which is where you take your whole joint and are able to bring it in a big circle. Like you can't quite do it in a wrist, you can't quite do it in a head. You can do a version of it, but you're not moving in every plane of motion that the human body is capable of. So to circle back to your question, kind of with that in mind, oftentimes if you're holding some sort of stress or pain in your body, or you're dealing from some trauma, it shows up as a chronic stressful point. So that can be tightness, that can be pain, that can be numbness, that can be radiating discomfort that kind of comes and goes. But with all these chronic things, there's usually a habit of, it's there and it's on and then it's gone sometimes. But if I push it too hard, it gets loud. But I've had it imaged, I've had it looked at, and there isn't anything extremely wrong with me. So the one thing to look for in this is if you've gone to an orthopedist and you've had like chronic hip pain, for example, like one side of your hip in the front and that hip flexor area where your knee comes up is just mad most of the time, or it shows up when you walk, that sort of thing. So you've had an image and they take a look at you and they go, let's say this imaginary person is in like their late 50s, early 60s. And they go, okay, well, you've got a bit of arthritis in your hip. And so they're like, you can take some, painkillers for it and send them on their way. Great. Arthritis is the most commonly kind of associated disorder with bodily pain. The problem is that almost all of us, if you look at the imagery of things, will have some bone destruct, like a little bit of bone arthritis, or just like a little osteopenia, like some wear and tear, especially as we get older. And then a lot of us will have small tears in the muscles or small tears in the tendons. And all of that is kind of normal. One of my favorite things is I read a study a while back where they studied, and it was a very particular group of people, but they studied about 200 different rock climbers, professional rock climbers, and they studied their shoulders. And all these people were asymptomatic, had no pain, none of those issues. And they imaged these people's shoulders. And I think it was around 80% of them had something horrible going on in their shoulders. So like a teared labrum, like a piece of ligament in their shoulder, torn rotator cuffs, tendinosis, which is just inflammation of the tendons, bursitis, which is inflammation of the bursa, the fluid-filled sac in your joints, like just a whole bunch of stuff that if you had gone and had an image, they'd be like, that's what your pain is. That's where your pain's at. And none of these people had any pain because they were strong through those positions, but it was also, they were flexible and felt comfortable in their own body. They felt safe. Because that's the big part.
Well,
the
look,
safety part is huge.
It is huge because typically, look, you're my second podcast recording of the day. Okay. So I just did another podcast earlier today that I recorded, and we were talking about how trauma gets stored in the body and what somatic healing means. And it really means to be, connected to your body. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I've said this before. You've heard me say this. Trauma is not what happened. Trauma is what's happening, meaning an event, something happened and it's still impacting you. The imprint was such that it's still impacting you today. And more times than not, we find that impact is physiological. It's inside the body. This is why this title, The Body Keeps the Score, is such a brilliant title from Bessel van der Kolk's book, because our body does hold on to the experience, right? Yeah. And so when we're not connected to our body, it doesn't feel safe. Or sometimes we disconnect to our body from our body in stress, right? We have a freeze response where we disconnect because it doesn't feel safe to be connected to our body, or we disconnect from people because it doesn't feel safe, or we don't find ourselves in relationship as much as we'd like to be because somewhere in the body, it doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, trauma recovery, and I'm putting that in quotes, or, healing trauma, it's really about getting connected with yourself and feeling safe with yourself and safe with others and safe with the world around you. And if you really stop and dissect and you think about what might be going on inside someone's body, feeling safe can mean I don't really feel like I can show up in the world as me. I don't really believe that I'm enough. Or I don't really feel that I'm worthy, or I'm afraid that if people really see the real me, I'm going to be ostracized or exiled or put to the side. So I have to wear these masks or show up in these different parts. And so safety and security is not necessarily from a physiological place, meaning like you're not afraid for your life, is what I'm saying. It can be safe in just being you. And being okay with it and feeling like people will love you just for being you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is being comfortable in your own skin and kind of having that base where you trust yourself to be who you are, and that's enough and that's good. And like you're saying, it's like trauma is the stuff that's happened to you. Trauma is that story where you keep telling yourself, well, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is not enough. And on a physical point, in that same sort of way, they talk about in yoga and they talk about in qigong, this idea of your root, right? So your root is like your root chakra, for example, if we go esoteric for a second. 7 chakras that run up your body. The root is right at the base of your pelvis. It's related to, they often call it, it's like related to sexual energy or life. And what they mean by that, it's not the sexual energy as we think about it. But it's more of like, this is the part of the body that is connected with you being alive on earth. This is the most animal part of you, where you are not thinking about big giant things. You are not able to, because sometimes I think about this where it's weird that as a human, we are a thinking machine. We are a thinking machine that is full of bacteria, that is aware that it is full of bacteria and cells, that is aware of itself, and is aware that other things are the same way. And we're a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense. And then it's just like you can keep thinking bigger and bigger, and you're able to examine the universe and the world in such a large way that it can be paralyzing. The way we avoid that is we have a root to the ground where it's I need to have my feet in the ground. I need to remember that I am a body on this earth. And then I can live out everywhere else. So kind of when you mention these things, and when we're talking about pain and other stuff, it's like a lot of it is feeling comfortable and feeling safe in your own skin. And you make a really good point, which is like, it's not like you feel like you're in physical danger. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's a joke. It's a running joke in my family that every birthday I had a birthday recently about a week ago. And every birthday I like to ask, am I easier to live with? And am I harder to kill? And I'm actually like currently trying to write a fitness book with this in mind, like how to be harder to kill. And part of that is the running joke is like every human, we have certain very specific fears, or like very universal fears that we all feel. And one of those is, fear of destruction, like fear of bodily destruction, fear of loneliness, fear of death. And for some reason, my greatest fear is just like, is being in physical danger and being attacked by an animal. Like that is like, when I say easier to kill, I don't literally mean by another person. I mean bear. Like,
but it's interesting that you brought up loneliness, because, I came up with this thing called the if-then spiral that I'll use from time to time with clients.
I don't know if
did I do it with you?
Yes, you did it with me, and it was helpful, because it's like, oh, but you please continue.
Okay,
yes,
and then maybe we can talk about it, because I may have started doing it right around when you and I were working together, and I have continued to do it where I see it appropriate. And the thing is it always comes back to the same answer, no matter who it is. None of these people know each other. Nobody's connected. Nobody knows the other person's story. Mm-hmm. But it's, if I do this, or if I don't do this, then what would happen? And then if that happened, what could happen? And if that happened, what could happen? And what's so fascinating to me is no matter who I do this with and how long the chain or the spiral is, when we get to the bottom, everybody has the same answer. Every single,
I'll be alone.
I'm going to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we get to the body, and remember, this is what we were talking about in the podcast episode I just recorded a couple of hours ago. So we're talking about how, the adaptation of freeze is such a great coping mechanism and survival skill, especially when we're young children, because we can't flee a situation often. Mm-hmm. We can't fight our way out of it. And if we're pre-verbal, we can't talk our way out of it. So freezing is this very natural instinct that we have as humans to disconnect when things feel too big, too much, too soon, too fast, right? And it usually has to be some form of an emotion that we may or may not know how to process. If we don't know how to process it, a great survival skill is to just disconnect from it. We hear about the word disassociation, disconnection, but this is where somatic healing is so important, because, when we're disconnected from our body, it's like we feel like we have no body. Okay. And that sometimes leaves us feeling to like we are a nobody. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and also if you feel like you have no body, like no physical body,
like
then
no connection to your body.
Yeah, no connection at all to your body. Then you are a badly made, like, wooden fence in the middle of a tornado.
That's right. You're exposed.
Everything's going to hit you. You're going to go flying into the air. You're not a and
You're
I
not
use this
grounded.
yeah, you're not a grounded chain link fence. Because I use
Right.
this a lot where it's like in nature, things are rewarded for being fit. And I'm just talking physically, but mentally it works as well, is for being physically flexible. Right.
Yeah.
So like if you are physically flexible, then you can go with the flow. It's just like watching my almost 2-year-old daughter move. You know, she has a big head. Like she got a big old head. I mean, most kids have big heads. And she's starting to grow into it now. For a while, she was using her forehead as a way to lift her body off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But she and all toddlers like have that bounce, that ability to kind of weave and turn, which is why you can see them hit something really hard and they just kind of get up and shake it off. And we can have that as adults. But a big piece of it is you have to be mentally flexible, which means you are not doing the if then situation. Because I remember we did talk about this because we were talking about it way back when I was like, I think I was a second grader and I had a really bad experience. With a teacher in school where they just told me to like stand up in front of class and read something. And I wasn't super confident in reading and I was starting to get a little nervous. And she rips the paper away and says, "You always do this," and then walked away. And it was, it's just like an adult having a bad day. But for me, it was that like, okay,
It
if
left an
I,
imprint.
yeah, but it's the same thing. It's like, okay, if I don't stay on my toes, this will happen again. And if this happens again, I'm going to get in trouble. And then if I get in trouble,
And
then
by
the
the
rest
way,
of the
everybody's looking, and then they're going to think X about me, and then I'm not
and then
going
I'm
to
going to
be
be stupid.
included,
And then, yeah. So
and then
you just,
I'm going to end up being by myself.
yes, exactly. So you end up in that same situation. So it's interesting to me. Oh, I lost my earpiece. It's interesting to me that you just had a discussion about somatics, which is just somatics I've always liked to describe as like very deep body awareness, like being able to feel
But you
your
have
body
to be
tighten up.
connected to your body. And I
Mhm.
think so many people are disconnected from their bodies. And one of the things I don't want to miss, because it's in my head, getting back
Mhm.
to all of this, is the reason why being alone is some of people's greatest fears,
Mm.
is because there's a primal part of us, like this primal part of our nervous system. We've evolved as humans exponentially. Okay.
Mhm.
And we've had to, because we've had to adapt. We've had massive exponential innovation over the series of lifetimes
Mhm.
of humanness that we've had to adapt. But there are parts of our body, specifically parts of our nervous system, that are still kind of primal. So if you go back and you think about who we were as humans at the beginning, where
Mhm.
we were in constant survival mode, unless we could kill it or grow it, we weren't going to eat, like
Mhm.
very physiological things needed to be met through our ability to survive. We didn't have modern day conveniences of anything. So
Yeah.
if you think about like just hunting and gathering, everything was done in clusters. Everything was done in communes, in villages, in groups, tribally.
Mhm.
Everything had to be done in these units. And what do we
Yes.
hear? United we stand, divided we fall, or we hear things like safety in numbers.
Mhm.
And there's something in the nervous system that's hardwired. If I'm not a part of the group, if I'm on the outside, it feels very vulnerable and very exposed.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's a very, very primal part of our being. And so I think still today, if we don't feel we're going to be a part of the larger group or the collective, because we are not confident in our own selves. So, me not being able to be a part of a group or collective is an interpretation and a guess,
Yeah.
right? Like, and
Yeah.
we're going
It's
to
some way you're seeing the world.
it's some way that you're seeing in the world. So if you do not believe you're enough for whatever reason, you're going to approach all group settings as though I don't really belong. And if they have me belong, if they really knew who I was, they'd probably kick me out. That
Mm.
feels very, very threatening. So now, fast forward, someone's coming to you in excruciating pain in their lower back and in their hips.
Mhm.
they've been to the ortho, they've had the scans, there's nothing outrageously wrong that would correlate with the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of the pain in their body.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah. No, what you're describing is like a normal Monday.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I guess my question is I'm going to have it. I have it right here. So how important, like this is where things like mental and physical practices like yoga, qigong, mindfulness, when we're trying to work trauma through the body, like how do you start to approach then your clients, and why do we think, and I'm curious if you even know this, like why do certain things like settle in the hips? Like I've heard a lot about the hips being this emotional center for a lot of people. Do you know about that?
Oh yeah. 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 So remember when I mentioned earlier that your hips are your root? They're
Yeah,
literally the thing there. Because remember, when you're born, um, your abs and your obliques and
they're
all of
not
that,
formed.
it's like they're not formed, and nor are your hips specialized enough to be legs. But they are kind of the first thing to help you move around.
Okay.
Because they are the thing, like sitting up is important and the head control is important, and that has to do with hip motion. But a way of thinking about it is that when things settle in the hips, when you are lacking stability, and I can mean that in a physical way or in a mental way, and you mentioned this, it's like people want to unhook,
Yeah.
just literally step away from their body. Um, when you do that, there's a physical repercussion to it where your body will start to get into that protective kind of fetal position shape. Like this is something we understand and something that's very, very hardwired into us. Again, back to the harder to kill thing. It's like protect the neck when feeling threatened, protect the chest. Basically, all the areas that we're ticklish is a good place to think about. Like when we're feeling threatened, those are the areas that we want to protect. That's one of the reasons they think we might be ticklish. Whole other side. But the reason that matters is that when things settle in the hips are the main source of balance for your body. So your feet and your calves are doing a lot of work. This is why plantar fasciitis and calf issues like shin splints and all that show up for a lot of people at least once in their life, because oftentimes those areas are overworking and overdoing whatever work you're doing. And the glutes, the hamstrings, the muscles in the back of the leg, the quads in the front, and the hip flexors in the front of the hip aren't moving as much as they should or picking up the slack as much as they should. So then what happens is these smaller muscle groups are just getting beat in and day out, and you get the soreness. So why does this mean like things collect in the hips? It's you're an adult usually when you're feeling these things, or at least you're a teenager, and you are going to continue to move in any way that you can, because your nervous system is very defined by, I got to move. I got to be able to do the thing that I got to do, especially if you're an adult. If you're a teenager, or like this can translate a little differently, but especially as an adult, most of us feel that sense of responsibility of like, I've got to get to work somehow. Or if you have a family, it's like, well, in the last year of my life, it's like, well, the kid's tired. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to go take a nap. Like we're going to get through this. We'll find some way for both of us to manage, and you'll manage that. And the way you do that is you borrow from some other pieces of your body to hold you on a little stronger. And similarly, it's like if mentally, if that's the place, then, and if you're dissociating from actually feeling things, what that often means is that you're no longer breathing in the way that you need to. So that diaphragmatic breath, the diaphragm breath. So this is the reason why yoga is so healing, and why qigong and tai chi and things like progressive muscle relaxation, which is more or less a Western invention that is qigong and yoga, where you're tightening a piece of your body and then relaxing it, which is a practice in somatics and a practice in a lot of mindfulness techniques, or even in hypnosis, right? Where you're just like, imagine a piece of you is tightening and relaxing, and I still have your recording where you're like stepping down the stairs and you're going down, and we're still relaxing. The thing is that if you are not breathing in that way most of the time, that has to be made up somewhere else, because you still have to move, you still have to function. So your brain will kind of cut certain things off and make it work. And it can have negative connotations. Like, for example, it's like, if I don't know, I'm a little high here, but it's like, if I don't know where my lats are in the back of my shoulders here, and I don't know how to use them, I can use the top of my traps to hold me up plenty well. I'll have chronic neck pain maybe and other stuff, but I won't die. Like, I'll keep moving. And it's the same thing. It's like, if I have to be tight and in a protective place, like if I feel like, at any moment I might be alone, or at any moment, like I might reveal too much about myself to someone and they won't like what they see.
Right.
Then I can't actually completely relax. And if you can't relax, then you're going to tighten up some of the muscles of breathing. And this is where it slips into, and I've noticed this is more and more people talk about this now, which is great, which is like pelvic floor dysfunction.
Well,
Right?
and this would kind of fall in and around the hip, correct?
Yeah. Because when I say hips as a muscle or as a joint and hip pain, what I really mean is like any muscle that is connected to the hip. So that includes all your glutes. That includes the hamstrings that run up behind your glutes. That includes the quadriceps that run to the front of the hips. That includes muscles called your adductors. Think Jane Fonda lying on her side lifting a leg.
Yeah.
Like all those muscles down the side. And the adductors, think Suzanne Summers with the Thigh Master. That's what it was called. Love it. Thigh Master. All of those muscles are also responsible for how your hips move. So that's a lot of different structures. And then you have the pelvic floor. Like traditionally, the way you strengthen that is Kegel exercises, which we can get into why that's not enough. But the reason why the pelvic floor is so important is that when you breathe, there are about 7 different spots that are supposed to move as you breathe, as in they're supposed to expand and contract. And they do correspond with the 7 chakras, interesting enough, in yoga. But the big ones that really matter for most of us is your chest is supposed to do some movement. Your belly is supposed to do some movement in all 360 degrees of direction, not just the front, but the sides and the back. And then also your pelvic floor, which is really attached to the front of your groin all the way back to close to your tailbone, and it kind of sits like a trampoline. You can think of it as I always like to describe it to people as like the core of your body is a house, and the roof is the diaphragm, which is underneath the ribs, and the walls are your obliques, the twisting muscles, and the abs, the rectus abdominis, the 6-pack that we're all thinking about, and then muscles of the lower back. And then the foundation is that pelvic floor. And if that is not able to move because you do not feel safe mentally or physically, you're most likely going to have hip stuff happen. And what's interesting actually is like we talk about this is like one of the things I've done for myself in the last year is I am somebody who, when I hurt my back way back, and probably was like this before, I exist in something called the posterior pelvic tilt. So what that is it's where the if you think of the bony part of the front of your hip, it's pushed back. So think a pink panther or a dog with a tail between its legs. And that is a position that is a tightening position. You use it in Pilates a lot. That tightens the pelvic floor and tightens the abs and tightens the glutes. And because of my history, just from a physical point of view, but also because of the stomach stuff, I wouldn't feel safe releasing that the other way. So an anterior tilt.
What that, like, how do you, and look, this is a silly question, not a silly question, because I really want the audience to hear this. How did you know you didn't feel safe with releasing that posture, getting into that posture?
Oh, well, a couple reasons. One is, as I learned how to relax the entirety of my body better through hypnosis, through working with you and other stuff, and just noticing that, oh, there's this piece of me that's always on. But the other way that it showed up was as I was getting physically stronger, as I was asking more of my body, as I was trying to explore new ways of moving. And really what that translates to is like, as I was learning how to do qigong, as I was trying to get more flexible physically, I realized, oh, there's these pieces of me that will not relax. Like I can foam roll them, I can get them massaged, I can do these things, and they will not. They might relax for a minute, but they will not release. And in my case, a big piece of that was trusting again that I am healthy and that I am strong, that I am past that healing journey. And then also just creating feedback enough that the body can start to trust those motions. Because in any physical thing, and I'd be curious to see if you would agree with this on the mental side, but anything that is unfamiliar is unsafe.
Absolutely. Because we don't know how to predict the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So
and that's a survival mechanism. Is it going to kill me? Am I going to end up alone? Like, is this going to be safe? We don't know. So we're always going to have like some form of protection, right?
Yeah. So a big part of that was just noticing those pieces. And then the way you help deal with it on the physical end to the mental end is you keep repeating motions and you keep noticing, oh, I actually feel better. Oh, I feel safer. Like I actually feel more ready to do more things in a good way. Okay, then you come back and you do it again and you do it again. So to use like a very concrete example is at this point, that orientation of my hips, learned how to relax my pelvic floor more, learned how to be in that much more relaxed state. Now it's just, I'm traditionally weightlifting, but instead of doing very low reps with heavy weight, I'm doing very, very high reps with, reasonably not nearly as heavy as I've done, but I'm spending way more time in that place that feels unfamiliar so that it feels calm and safe. But the issue is, and I imagine you agree with me here, is like, but this is why things collect in the hips so often, is that's an area of your body that because it's so flexible, if anything isn't working as it should, i.e. your breath isn't moving, your balance is off, something broke, the joints will naturally tighten up to create stability. Because again, you are not going to stop moving.
Especially, by the way, you're not going to stop moving. You're going to be in extra movement if you're in a sympathetic state of fight or flight also, which just your body saying, I have to take action because I feel like there's something wrong.
Yeah. And you can kind of see that. I mean, like, oh boy, like when you're talking about the not wanting to be alone, and I have been working with more teenagers recently, and the generation, I guess they're the generation under me, I don't know, generations are silly, but they've got some stuff to deal with because that fight or flight, that fear of being alone, thanks to this connectivity but not connectivity of social media and this constant description of like what we're supposed to look like or what we're supposed to feel like, that's creating this sense of, the fight or flight, which keeps us tight. And of course, there are different stages of stress response. It's not just fight or flight. There are positive stress responses, right?
Of course.
Like there is the whole, like, working in a group when something really stressful happens, humans can really commune together.
But again, it's relative, right? So when we're in a sympathetic response, when we're in a fight or flight response, when it's not required, like if you're cramming for your freaking APs, get yourself a little bit of adrenaline. Like that's going to keep you going. There's value to that level of stress. What I think is, societally, we're at a level of stress that's not warranted for the situation. And then it's almost like your own toxic sludge, right? Like you're living in this toxic environment that's this perceived threat of not enoughness all the time.
And you're so used to it.
That physical rigidity inside your body. And you're so used to it, you don't even know.
You don't even know. You're the whole frog boiling in a pot of water.
Oh my God.
You just have no idea.
We were just talking about that. Where was I? We were just using that analogy on I've been podcasting too much. One of my other guests has used that analogy, Kim Weeks, many, many times about the frog in the boiling water. You just don't know. So it becomes your myth of normal. And it's funny. I have the book right here, The Myth of Normal. I'm going to go see Gabor Mate speak this Saturday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And he's going to be talking about it. And really the reality is your adaptations become your norm. But it's kind of an internal toxic environment for yourself because it's not relative to actually what's going on now. It's based on what happened then.
Sorry, something happened.
Do you hear me?
I do.
Okay, lovely.
Yep.
That's the art and the science of the podcast, guys.
The Art and Science podcast, and that this
But
thing doesn't hit my ear.
the toxicity can be from within if your view of yourself is not healthy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I think
Definitely.
you and I work well together, because when you're working with someone and you can see that flexibility could be available to them, tell me if I'm right or wrong, and yet there are parts of them that are like not letting go. We're not going to allow ourselves to get into this fluid state, because if we do, it's too further exposed, too vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then the
You
next
can't-
thing I know, the person's knocking on my door saying, Grant sent me. And I'm like, okay, take a seat.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's like with people that I've actually sent you who have long COVID or the other stuff. I was like, you have been in that state of panic. Not, and in their case, some of it's mental in the sense of, you're like, okay, where am I going to get hit next? What's going to happen?
No
When's the
doubt.
shoe going to drop? And then the other part of it is like you enter this mental state if you're dealing with long-term illness. So it's the same thing like I mentioned in the beginning. It's like the being exposed to long-term mold. It's interesting to me now as I've gotten rid of it and my body is getting rid of all that stuff, is
how much it was actually suppressing.
It's much easier to find calm than even like after where it was already easy. Like it's much easier to find calm. And then what's also interesting is because I can find calm as I'm doing physical exercise, my body is responding to it appropriately.
Well, listen, we have this thing called the window of tolerance. And today I was in supervision. We were talking about, using a different term, which is the circle of capacity. But the reality is that when we are rooted, going back to what you said before, to self, and that is enough, and our parts are not leading us, we're being self-led, and we can widen that capacity for life, and we want to play a little bit bigger, everything is just more fluid. When our window of capacity or our window of tolerance is narrow, everything becomes much more rigid, and we actually don't have a lot of room for movement anyway, because we're either going to pop in to this sympathetic state, or we're going to drop down into this dorsal vagal state where we're like lethargic and lacking motivation and lacking, and procrastinating and feeling sick and chronic fatigue, chronic illness, chronic lethargy. It's a two-way street. I just don't see one not playing well into the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something, see, this is where the tricky part where it's, there's a lot of like suggestions of one of the ways you deal with this is go meditate. But it's kind of what kind of meditation or what is available to you, because it depends on the different muscles and everything else. So this is one of the reasons why I love the practice of qigong, which is a movement-based idea where you can, if you've been up here, like if you've been up, like you said, you're in that fight or flight, trying to just tell that person, be like, okay, I want you to sit and breathe.
But you know what would be interesting? Because I feel like if you get into a real meditative state, and this is just, me shooting the shit, I have nothing to base this on, but you're kind of trying to get connection to a higher sense of self. And to me, we want to get more grounded into our actual bodies.
Oh, see, I fundamentally disagree with that goal. So when you're meditating, in terms of like a classic Buddhist sense, what you're truly after is being in that moment and only that moment.
But there's nothing in your body.
You are in your body because you have to be. Because your body, you cannot exist in a good state of meditation if you are trying to leave your body.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to be physically inside of it, because that's the way you stay in the moment. As soon as you leave your body and go somewhere else, that's a spiritual journey. That's something a little different.
Yeah.
But it's something where if you are staying within your physical breath, then you're good. Because the whole idea is like,
I have a whole idea Okay, so I've been to Grant's studio before, and I know I need to come back. You have these yoga blocks
I can go
that
get
are
one.
filled with what?
Oh, with metal. They're filled with
Metal.
steel.
Yeah, go ahead, go get one. So
Yeah, I'll go get one.
okay, so Grant has taken these yoga blocks and he's drilled holes into them and he's filled them with like what, a molten
Oh no,
metal?
I got some rod, not nearly that fancy. I got some iron rod.
Okay, and
You
you
can see
put it
there's little
in.
points.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. But
on
it's
both
heavy,
sides.
guys. It's
Yeah, this
very,
weighs
very
about
heavy.
10 pounds.
Yes. What I'm thinking is you and I together are hosting some sort of workshop where we're doing a guided hypnosis and we're trying to get people's nervous systems to kind of,
That'd be so fun.
you know, feel safe. But everyone's laying down on a blanket with one of these on their stomach area, on their solar plexus. So they feel that rootedness, like they feel something up against their body to help them
Yeah.
further connect with their body.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm going with
Oh
it?
no,
'Cause
I
you
see.
have
This
that
is what you're
weight.
describing is something that I try to do with people before I teach yoga every
It's
time.
amazing.
One simple way if people like, because I love giving, like, try this to see if it helps, is one of the simplest ways to find that is most people who come in, I do tell them, I was like, you don't need a yoga block with a lot of weight. I have that just because it's a familiar object and it can be used in similar ways. But it can be as simple as before you go to sleep at night, grab a book. If you still have the yellow pages for some reason, grab that, or a dictionary also for some reason. But something with a little bit of weight in it, something with a little bit of weight in it. And if you allow that to just sit on your belly and then just try to move it as you breathe. So you're not trying to tighten your abs and push them forward. You're not trying to pull your abs in, but you just let it breathe. That outward pressure can make it way easier to feel inside your body. So
Yeah.
this is why, and I'd be curious. It's like when you were mentioning, you were talking about somatics and everything else. It's like a lot of these practices involve like, okay, do you feel this thing, or do you feel where my hand's at? All right, now move that piece.
That's right.
That is why I have so much metal and weights in my studio, because once your breathing is good and your movement and you're feeling like a little more inside your body, and this happens pretty quickly, but like one of the easiest ways to feel safe and stable and aware of yourself is, here, hold this thing that weighs something. Like we're talking about being rooted, like I'm talking about literally holding something and letting it pull you down, because that actually helps you breathe more. But what's interesting is that when people often have, let me get another cue thing, like when people have a weight, this is a kettlebell. When people have a weight, oftentimes when they first hold that weight, they want to keep holding it up. Think of like you move a couch, right? like you're helping somebody move and you're just trying to keep it off the ground, right? This is a horribly inefficient way to hold something. If I let my shoulders pull down and I let my body pull the weight into me, I can hold this for way longer than if I try to lift it up continually. So it's the equivalent of like, if you're on the subway and you're holding on to something, you don't hold on to it and try to pull yourself up, right, to stay stable. You're not trying to just grip with your hand. You actually literally hang into it and let your body pull into it. So it's like if we're talking about that stress relationship and being aware of the inside of your body, being comfortable enough to hold things into yourself, like that's a huge game changer. And also in terms of relaxation. So like to circle back, it's this kind of like, if we're talking about meditation and we're talking about being inside the body, that's what I mean. It's like when I meditate, the way I like to think of it is, as I'm focusing on my breath, I end up in the background noise that is the rest of the world. So you're still with your body. It's just your body's no longer any different than the things around you. You still know where you are, but you see how similar you are to all things. You don't lose yourself, but you just gain that sense of you are not an extreme, you are not an other. And that in and of itself helps you, one, never feel lonely because you are what everyone else and every other thing is. But it's because I think sometimes, and what can happen is like if you're in that meditative state and if you spent time in it, like you can get, there are different levels of this, but like the one that most of us want to get to, at least initially, is you hit this place of euphoria where you just feel really good because you are in that place where everything is one, all is one, one is all, that circular place. And that can let you feel and reset that calm notion. The problem is that if you feel unsafe in the beginning of that, you will never let go because letting go involves an expanding of perspective, right? Because isn't that, and you can tell me wrong, but isn't that is one of the dangers of, because you hear about people microdosing and you hear about this other stuff and kind of people self-medicating their way through this modern world of just constant stress. And one of the issues is, if you take those substances, they can expand your viewpoint and expand your point of reference. And if you are a high anxiety person, that can break you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to have somebody on the podcast to talk about, psychedelics and ketamine assisted psychotherapy specifically. And, look, anybody can go to like one of these IV drip places right now and get a ketamine drip. I don't know that that's the best thing to do because you don't know how your nervous system is going to react. But there is something known as ketamine assisted psychotherapy where you're actually sitting with a psychotherapist that has learned how to hold space from a sound and safe protocol and knows how to help guide somebody through what their nervous system will experience on that trip.
Yeah. Well,
and then allow them to process and integrate that back into their body.
That's wild. Well, my favorite thing is, I have not done these things. I haven't felt the need to, but it's ayahuasca, for example, has like become very popular with some people. What I love is that traditional ayahuasca practitioners, what you would do is you'd go sit with a medicine woman or a medicine man, and he would or she would take this stuff, and then it would give them such intense empathy that they could actually sit there and help you work through things as you need them, but they are taking the medicine. And of course, it's like nobody wants to travel to Central America to have someone else take this thing and tell them about the experience. That's not enough. That's not direct. So we ended up in this other situation where you're kind of, it's all about, it's like what feels safe. And if you feel safe, you can explore, right? Because kids don't like wide open spaces. They like, if there's a fence, they'll go around the whole place.
They like to have the confine and the structure.
Yeah. It's if they're, once they understand they're in that space, and they're like, okay, I will explore. Similarly, that our brains don't stop liking that. If I'm offered a limitless space, I mean,
you're too exposed.
Yeah. It's not going to feel nice. Yeah. But it's the same with training and with all of that other stuff of getting your body to physically relax. And if we circle back to the hips, it's kind of like, if things don't feel safe, you can't relax into a new pattern. And whether that is mentally derived because you've been dealing with pain, or you've been dealing with something very specific, or some very specific trauma. Some of the worst pelvic people that I've ever met have dealt with like really bad child abuse and stuff like that, where there is something very specific where even decades later, they're not letting go of this piece. And in some cases, even like there's an incapability where it's been a very complicated journey because sometimes when you let go of stuff, it can be too much. That can be so different that you're not prepared. Regardless, it's like,
I mean, listen, the reality is here, the body keeps the score. The body knows what it's doing.
Yep.
It gets rooted in the hips. The hips become very painful, and life is very difficult when we do not have good hip mobility. And it can really change the longevity, the health span, the lifespan, all the things. But, we can't disregard the physical from the emotional if we're having a hard time moving through the physical. And I think it's really important, whether you're working with a practitioner like Grant, or you're working with a PT, say, or you're going to an orthopedic, if it doesn't feel right in your gut, meaning like intuition, if it doesn't feel right that this shouldn't be happening. Like, I've had a lot of issues with my shoulders over the years, and I've just known to be able to listen to myself and say, we're not going down the right path here. I need to take a different approach, and get more intuitive of like, what am I holding on to that I'm like this all the time, where it doesn't feel safe to go like this, right? And we need to think about the same thing inside our hips. So thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm sure this will not be the last time that you're on the podcast, but I always like to bring in this piece of information to my listeners, because I know a lot of people are walking around with a tremendous amount of pain and not a lot of answers. So if you're local to where I am, I'm in Somerset County, New Jersey. You want to check out Grant Clark, Hidden Warrior. It's right in Plaquemine, New Jersey. It's right on that edge of Bedminster. And if you're not local, I'm sorry, you cannot access Grant unless you come here.
No,
or do you have
you
it
still
on
can.
virtual now?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, yeah.
I am so wrong. We're going to scratch that. Okay. If you're not local to Somerset County, New Jersey, how can people work with you, Grant?
So the way we did this pretty recently. So the way one is, I've been doing online programs for people where I've been setting up specific videos for them after doing an online assessment, which thanks to COVID, we got really good at. And then the other thing is, we released a bunch of like small mini courses. I think I sent you a text about this a while back, because I wanted people to try them. But we're making new ones every month, but they're for very specific issues. So like there's a mindfulness one that is all about doing a little bit, 7 minutes of qigong a day for a week-long stint, just to get a sense. There's one that's all about stress, that's specific to stress and anxiety, trying to find, like you asked, like, how do you know when those things are tight? It's like, that was the goal. So all these things were made in mind with, when you're trying to learn a new skill, especially through a course or anything else, when they're bigger courses, most people don't finish them because it's just too much stuff. So we just tried to keep these to like habit forming 5-minute things. But beyond that, I do work with people. Like I have several people all across the United States, a couple people in Europe that I meet with usually about once a month to help them kind of guide them through those pieces.
So guys, disregard, you can gain access to Grant online. Grant, how would people find you?
Best way to find me is you can go to our website, which is hidden-warrior.com. You can also look us up on Instagram, Hidden Warrior Yoga. Those are probably the two best places to, well, if you go to the Instagram, you'll see kind of more what we're about. But both of those have my contact info that you can reach out to me directly from there, and we can help you out. Or if we can't, we will find people like Stacey who can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. Again, it's hidden-warrior.com. And on Instagram, it is Hidden Warrior Yoga. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Grant for sharing his insights and experience on releasing trauma through movement, especially in such an impactful area like the hips. Your story and his guidance has reminded us of the incredible resilience and potential we all have. If you want to learn more about Grant and his work and the Hidden Warrior approach, check out Hidden Warrior's resources. If you found this episode helpful, I would like you to subscribe. Please leave a review, share it, tag it, comment on it. I will always respond to your comments. Please share it with somebody that you think could benefit from the insight. Until next time, remember that healing is a journey and every step forward counts.